Toys, as they currently function in modern WoW, were not introduced into the Worlds of Draenor expansion, in which the Toybox collection feature was added. Before the Toybox, toys were usually just items, trinkets, gear, or consumables with a cooldown that for the most part just took up much needed space in a player's inventories in both their bags and bank. And at number 10 on this list, we have Steam Tonk. This engineering crafted item was added in WoW's first expansion, the Burning Crusade, launched in December of 2006. Even though the Steam Tank minigame was added to the Darkmoon Fair in patch 1.10, Storms of Azeroth, which was released on the 28th of March 2006, it was not until December of that same year that engineers could craft their own version of the Steam Tonk. Initially, the engineer would have to turn in 40 Darkmoon tickets for a quest to get the schematic while the Darkmoon Fair was up. But Blizzard eventually relented and made the schematic for the SteamCon controller purchasable from engineer supply vendors in Orgrimmar and Ironforge for 64 silver in patch 2.3. It should be noted that while the Steam Tonk controller could only be made by engineers, it is bind on use, meaning anyone can buy one and use it after trading it or buying it from the auction house. This allowed every player to have their own little toy Eye of Kilrogg ability without having to be a warlock. The Steam Tonk controller itself was never actually made into a real toy in the game, but its legacy does live on. First, it can still be crafted using classic engineering to this very day. Second, non-engineers can still get a very similar battered Steam Tonk controller from the quest Missing Friends in the Terracar Forest. Third, with the Toybox updated WoD, a toy that is basically the same thing as the Steam Tonk controller was added, called the Darkmoon Tonk controller. However, this toy is significantly harder to earn because it's locked behind the achievement Ace Tonk Commando, which requires the player to score 45 hits on a target within 1 minute while being chased by zeppelins and trying to target randomly spawning targets. Finally, the Steam Tonk controller serves as a basis for many other controller toys that were to follow in the game, like the Legion Invasion Simulator, the Crashin' Thrashin' controller toys, and the Micro Artillery controller, to name a few. Since it has its roots in classic WoW, we're including the Steam Tonk controller as among the oldest toys in the game, even if the item itself never fully received the official title of toy. And at number 9, we have Elune's Lantern. Let's illuminate some knowledge from this Lunar Festival toy, as it is fairly light on coverage. That is because it was added to the game in patch 1.9 in January 2006, a little unimportant patch you might not have heard of, called the Gates of Ahn'Qiraj. Elune's Lantern is obtained after doing the quest Elune's Blessing from the holiday event called the Lunar Festival, which first became available in late January 2006. To get this toy requires the player to have to kill the world boss Omen in Moonglade. The toy is pretty underwhelming, however, since all it does is convert a solid stone crafting reagent into an Elune stone. Elune stone is a consumable item with only one charge that will summon a ring of light on a specific location that lasts for 3 minutes. It also has a cooldown of 24 hours, making it one of the longest cooldowns on toys in the game, as well as one of the very first few toys that requires an item or reagent in order to use. In addition to that, there are several other ways to get this effect, most notably with an Elder's Moonstone, which can be obtained at no extra cost and only requires interaction with an Elder. Since vanilla, there may have been several iterations of this toy, most notably with the high-powered flashlight, which is a trinket made with engineering from Wrath of the Lich King. There's also a toy from World of Draenor called the Personal Spotlight, although it has a cooldown of 5 minutes and can only be seen by the player who uses it. This was ostentatiously done to stop people from blinding everyone with it, but it also means fun detected to some. The Elune's Lantern toy came out a little over 1 year after WoW launched, and continued a precedent for fun items to be added during holiday events. Additionally, it became so popular that several iterations of the toy had been added throughout the history of the game. So despite all of its flaws under a close inspection, the Elune's Lantern toy is certainly a delight. And at number 8, we have a tie between two toys, the Ultrasafe Transporter Gadgetzan and the Dimension Ripper Everlook. Both of these items can only be crafted with and used by players with the engineering profession. Both of these two items were introduced in the game in patch 1.5 titled Battlegrounds, which was released on the 7th of June 2005. There's not much to say about these items, other than that the transporter requires no much engineering and the Ripper requires goblin engineering. What is important is that these two engineering items set up a long-standing tradition of adding a new teleport for engineers to the new continent for each new expansion. The Burning Crusade saw the Ultrasafe transport to Tulshi Station for no much engineering, and the Dimension Ripper Area 52 for goblin engineering. Since Wrath of the Lich King, these teleports have been called wormhole generators, with the exception of Warlords of Draenor, in which the item was named Wormhole Centrifuge. In addition to the aforementioned ones from Classic and TBC, there are wormhole generators from Northrend, Pandaria, Draenor, Argus, Kul Tiras, Zandalar, the Shadowlands, the Dragon Isles, and Khazalgar. Blizz seems to be wishy-washy about being able to teleport to certain defined locations, since some of these teleporters allow the player to hone in on a specific location, and others are just random spawns on the continent. So while this major drawback does somewhat limit the functionality of a few wormholes, it still beats having to travel to and then go find random portals and cities, which certainly makes using wormholes a much faster way of getting around. There are some interesting details about each of these toys, but I digress. Since wormholes have a proven track record of being added to every expansion and even before in Classic, they are certainly here to stay. The other important thing to point out is that these engineering toys also were a prototype of many other teleportation toys that would eventually be added to the game, such as the ever-shifting mirror from the Warlords of Draenor expansion. So not only are the Ultrasafe transporter Gadgetzan and Dimension Ripper Everlook very useful even to the present, they are also a core pillar of engineering, and they would be a large hole, but not a wormhole, without them. And at number 7, we have another engineering item, this time the World Enlarger. This item was added to WoW in patch 1.4, the Call to War, which was released on the 19th of April 2005. This item requires no much engineering to make and use. When it is used, it shrinks the player down to a very small size. Yes, the World Enlarger is just a simple and fun little toy. And it is true there are other ways to grow smaller, even in Classic, like with the Nova Shrink Ray or the Noggin Fogger Elixir. Another toy very similar to this one is the Whole Body Shrinka, which was added in Mists of Pandaria, specifically patch 5.3, entitled Escalation. Aside from just allowing for interesting effects on player models, it also paved the way for some more weird and unique boss fights, such as the mouse fight against Mana Devour and Return to Karazhan. The World Enlarger may seem a little underwhelming, but it does cast a very big shadow indeed. And at number 6, we have the Snowmaster 9000. This toy comes from the Feast of Wintervale holiday, which had its first appearance in patch 1.2 titled Mysteries of Meridon, which was released on 18th of December 2004. The Snowmaster 9000 is cracked with engineering, and unfortunately only engineers can use it. The Snowmaster 9000 is essentially a snowball blunderbuss, which can fire snowballs as projectiles. While snowballs are mostly harmless in WoW, they can lead to some interesting shenanigans, especially with their flavor text, which reads, "Throw me." The Snowmaster 9000, despite its meme name, is actually hilariously underpowered, as it only allows for engineers to create one snowball a day using one refreshing spring water. So much for letting it snow. For context, Wintervale vendors sell them in stacks of 5 for 10 coppers. This is why the Snowmaster 9000 is ranked lower than the next toy on this list, even though they both came out at the same time. Even if it is a bit of a troll item, the Snowmaster 9000 is a unique toy and snowball fights are always fun, and it's the only way to have a snowball fight all year round. Coming in number 5 is the Wintervale Disguise Kit. This toy turns players into a snowman that is able to tip its hat, which is a literal hat tip to Frosty the Snowman. Players receive the item in the mail from Great Father Winter himself after completing the quest A Smoky Wood Pastures Thank You. However, it takes the mail exactly 1 day to go through, and the player is not mailed the item until 24 hours after completing the quest. World of Warcraft launched on November 23, 2005, which means that the Wintervale Disguise Kit was added to the game less than a month after its initial launch. Indeed, this toy is so associated with the holiday that there's even an achievement that is required with the toy called a Frosty Shake, which is required in order to get the meta achievement for the Wintervale, which is called Merrymaker. When this toy is applied, it does make the player immobile, but it also makes them start dancing. Despite a cool reception for just being a glorified snowman costume, no one can deny the Wintervale Disguise Kit in its place at number 5 spot on this list, and the magic that must be inside its hat. And the item at number 4 is a little bit different because it was never actually turned into an official toy in the Toybox. This item is the famous, or perhaps infamous, Bloodsail Admiral's hat. This hat has been in World of Warcraft since its inception, all the way back in November of 2004. When used, it summons a unique Blood Parrot companion. To obtain this item, a player has to do a quest for the Bloodsail Buccaneers. However, in order to be friendly with the Bloodsail Buccaneers, you have to be hated by the Booty Bay faction. Therefore, a lot of players get this item on their way to the achievement Insane the Membrane, which requires the player to be honored with the Bloodsail Buccaneers. When the quest is complete, the player gets a feat of strength achievement called Avast Ye Admiral. This is a long and notorious grind, and even the achievement notes this by saying, "And try to get some fresh air every now and then," which is the 2008 equivalent of Go Touch Grass. Up until Legion, there was only one restriction on the item, and that was the fact that the hat was cloth, so only cloth-wearing classes could equip it. It wasn't until Legion that Blizzard made the Bloodsail Admiral's hat a cosmetic item. The fact that the hat is so popular can still be proven, as you will often today still see players slaughtering guards in Booty Bay. The best way to get rep with the Bloodsail Buccaneers is to kill NPCs in Booty Bay. This is interesting to note because the levels and health of the Booty Bay Bruiser guards increase with each new expansion released up until Cataclysm. First to level 67 TBC, then to 77 for Wrath, and then 85 for Cat, etc, etc. This coincided with the increase in the player's level cap. Note that these are not the usual maximum level caps of most NPCs, which increase to max level with a new expansion comes out, but rather that these levels are a couple below the current cap at the time. The Bloodsail Admiral's hat proved so popular along with the title The Insane that Blizzard changed the guards for each new expansion, either because they decided fun was being had, or they wanted the grind to actually mean something and not be really easy. But in all honesty, it's probably a mixture of both. This is actually the first notable example of proto-level scaling, and level scaling itself wouldn't really be implemented in the game until the Shadowlands expansion. The Bloodsail Admiral's hat is not only famous, but the fact it can only be used on the one character who obtained it, as opposed to the account-bound toys, actually cements its status as something truly unique. All that aside, this simple hat is one of the first items in WoW to summon companions. Since then, several thousands of toys and companion battle pets have been introduced to the game, and most of the earliest ones probably initially took their inspiration from the Bloodsail Buccaneer's hat. All in all, the Bloodsail Admiral's hat definitely deserves a hat tip at number 4. And at number 4, we have the Orb of Deception. This very rare trinket drops from Classic and allows the player to transform themselves into another playable race from the opposite faction for 5 minutes on a 30-minute cooldown. It also has a higher drop chance from bosses in Classic dungeons and raids. This item remained a trinket all the way up into Warlords of Draenor when it was converted into a toy and added to the Toybox. It wasn't until Shadowlands that Blizzard finally let players do content together cross-faction, but at least this toy allowed players to feel like they were doing it earlier than that. Specifically, the toy changes each race to the opposite race of the other faction. Humans change into orcs, orcs change into humans, and the other core races from Classic are dwarves and trolls, night elves and undead, and gnomes and tauren. Both the Burning Crusade and Cataclysm introduced 2 new races to both factions. So those are the pairs. The Draenei turned to Blood Elves and Worgen into Goblins. All the allied races likewise are also paired when they were introduced. Lightforged Draenei and High Mountain tauren, Void Elves and Nightborn, Dark-Eyed Dwarves and Mag'har Orcs, Cold Terrans and Zandalari, and Mecha Gnomes and Volpera. The final 3 races, which start off as neutral, which include Pandaren, Drakthir, and the Earthen, are all given a random race of the opposing faction each time the toy is used. There are a plethora of transforming toys and consumable items in WoW, and most of them can be traced right back to the Orb of Deception trinket. Even toys like the Transmorpher Beacon are iterations of this idea from almost 20 years ago. Not only is the Orb of Deception deceptively influential in the types of toys that have been made into WoW, but it also was updated with each new race, which reflects how unique and interesting of a toy it actually is. And at number 2, we have Dartol's Rod of Transformation. This is another transformation toy, which turns the player into a furbolg for a short period of time. While a pretty simple toy, it has a long history, so let's start from the very beginning. Dartol's Rod of Transformation was originally a quest item when added to the game at launch. The item is a quest item that was only available during an Ashenvale's quest called Rain's Cleansing. It was also an Alliance-only quest, so Horde players could not get the item. In order to be able to use the item, Alliance players had to accept the quest and then keep it in their quest log and then not turn it in to be able to use the staff. Dartol's Rod could be used anywhere and had a 1-minute cooldown, making it quite the fast, friendly, furry, furbolg faculty fabrication. Blizzard did try to nerf the item to only work in the Zone of Ashenvale and Wrath, but that didn't work, so it was rolled back a patch later. Cataclysm saw a complete revamp of most of the old world, including Ashenvale. The old quest was removed and replaced by a new one, but a new quest was very similar and also had a similar item called Dartol's Rod. However, this quest item did indeed now only work in the Zone of Ashenvale, but it was also available to Horde players now. Because Dartol's Rod of Transformation was so popular, Blizzard added into the game in Cataclysm as an item called the Staff of Fur and Claw, which can still be purchased from the Timbermaw Hold by both factions after hitting Exalted with them. Unfortunately, this requires a long rep grind, and the toy only lasts for 3 minutes on top of a 1-hour cooldown, which is quite the reduction of what the original quest item had allowed. The Staff of Fur and Claw was made into a toy with the introduction of the Toybox in Warlords of Draenor. The story of Dartol's Rod is not quite over yet, however. Furbolgs were once again added to the game with the Dragonflight expansion, this time with a newer model. Once again, players could grind rep and learn Furbolg to help the Winterpelt Furbolg, and in return, when the players had Exalted with them, the Furbolg Chief would give them another toy, this time called the Primal Staff of Claw and Fur. This toy does the exact same thing as the Staff of Fur and Claw, but instead turns the player into the newer model Furbolg added in Dragonflight. The Primal Staff of Fur and Claw is much better than its Cataclysm predecessor, and the fact that transformation lasts for 5 minutes on a 10-minute cooldown, instead of the terrible 3 minutes on a 1-hour cooldown. Going back to the original Dartol's Rod of Transformation from Classic, this item is important in WoW's toys history for 2 big reasons. First, it was the very start of transformation toys in general. In Dragonflight, there are now probably hundreds of these toys. Secondly, it was the first toy to be rewarded from a quest, even if it wasn't intended to be. This set the precedent for quests to award toys, and today in the modern game, there are hundreds of toys that are just awarded from quests. So this funny, silly little goofy quest item from Classic essentially jump-started transformation toys in WoW, which is why it comes at number 2 on this list. And finally at number 1, we have the Piccolo of the Flaming Fire. This toy was originally a trinket from Classic Stratholme that dropped from the Heartsinger Forest Inn. Even novice WoW players will probably know this toy because it's used to troll and group content all the time, such as the beginning of Battlegrounds or in raids. The Piccolo of Flaming Fire, when used, causes players to dance without their consent. If you think it's annoying in Modern WoW, it's nothing compared to what it was in Classic and early expansions. First off, the toy was so annoying that by the second patch of WoW, Mysteries of Maraudon, Blizzard had already reduced its AoE effect. Up until the Legion expansion, using the Piccolo of the Flame Fire trinket or toy affected everyone around you, not just those in your party or raid. And it wasn't until Warlords of Draenor when it was made into a toy that it stopped players from being interrupted while eating or drinking. Before WoD, the effect also lasted an indefinite duration, as long as the player didn't move. Its AoE effect was also nerfed to affect those only within 5 yards of the player as well in WoD. So this toy is not only one of the most trolliest items in the game, it is also one of the longest and most enduring. The Piccolo of the Flaming Fire is up there with the toy train set on how annoying it can be. In fact, Blizzard has even put in measures against abusing these items. In the modern game, the Piccolo of Flaming Fire has a 30-second long cast, and the toy train set can be destroyed with a wind-up train wrecker. Additionally, there are some items that cancel out some of these troll toys, such as the Neural Silencer. The Piccolo of the Flaming Fire is such a meme that there is even a trading card named after the trinket, which was released in the Heroes of Azeroth pack in 2006. The Piccolo of the Flaming Fire continues to uphold its ignoble title as one of the most annoying toys in the game even to this very day, some 20 years later, which is quite an accomplishment. The trinket and its subsequent toy version are one of the most nerfed toys in WoW, and Blizzard has added items to use against it because it's so annoying. Combine this onto the fact that this trinket was added when WoW originally launched in 2004, and it's no wonder that it edges out the Bloodsail Admiral hat, the Orb of Deception, and Dartol's Rada transformation to come in at the first spot on this list of the top 10 oldest trinkets in WoW. Well, that does it for this video. We've had some fun fooling around with toys, but who would have guessed that all the oldest toys in WoW come from vanilla are iterations of items from vanilla. As always, thank you for watching and giving me the privilege of your time. If you have any suggestions for more top 10 videos, leave them in the comments below and we may just toy around with them a bit. Take care, and we'll see you in the next video.